You're about to discover something that could completely change the way you approach sports betting. I spent the last few weeks talking to some of the sharpest bettors in the game, guys who move six figures on a single weekend, professionals who've been doing this for 15, sometimes 20 years. And every single one of them told me something that seems almost too simple to be true, yet it's the difference between winning consistently and just throwing money at the sportsbooks, hoping for the best. They all said the exact same thing: never, and I mean never, place a significant bet in that final hour before kickoff. Not 30 minutes before, not even 2 hours before. But specifically, that last 60 minutes is when the markets are at their most dangerous, when the casual money floods in like a tidal wave, and when the odds shift in ways that completely destroy value. This isn't just some random advice someone gave me at a bar. This is a phenomenon that's been studied, documented, and exploited by professional bettors for years. It's called the public money effect, and it's the invisible force that separates the winners from the losers in sports betting. Now, when I first heard this, I'll be honest with you, it sounded kind of ridiculous. I mean, why would the timing matter that much? The odds are the odds, right? A -7-point spread is a -7-point spread, whether you bet it at noon or 5 minutes before the game starts. But then one of the guys I was talking to, a legendary sharp who's been crushing the books for over 2 decades, he pulled up his laptop and started showing me the data. He showed me spreadsheets of line movements, win rates across different betting windows, and tracking data from his own betting logs. And that's when everything clicked. The hour before kickoff isn't just any hour. It's the hour when the entire market dynamic shifts. And if you're betting in that final hour without understanding what's happening behind the scenes, you're stepping right into one of those traps. I talked to this one guy, let's call him Marcus for the sake of privacy, and Marcus has been betting professionally for almost 18 years. He's got a team of 3 other guys who work with him, and together they handle somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 million in wagers every football season. When I asked him about the hour before kickoff, he literally laughed and then got serious real quick. He told me that the hour before kickoff is when he makes some of his easiest money, but only because he's betting against the public money effect, not with it. He said during normal hours, during normal betting windows, the sharps and the books are in a constant battle for advantage. The sharps are trying to find value before the public arrives. The books are trying to predict where the public money will go so they can move the lines. But it's relatively balanced, in a weird way. But then, that final hour hits, and it's like someone flipped a switch. The public money, and we're talking about the casual bettor, the guy who threw down money on 3 games at the bar after work, the Instagram followers of a betting influencer who just posted their pics, the office pool participants who decide to jump in with their own money, all of that volume arrives almost simultaneously. And the sportsbooks, they've been expecting this. They know it's coming. They've studied the patterns for years. They know exactly which games are going to get hammered by public money, which sides, which totals, and they move accordingly. Marcus showed me an example from a weekend in October where there was a Monday night football game, a huge matchup between 2 top 5 teams. The line had been bouncing around all week. Public sentiment was heavily in favor of the home team, and as the game got closer, Marcus said the books started moving the line aggressively against that public sentiment. By Sunday afternoon, the line had moved almost 2 full points from where it had been on Saturday morning. But then, starting at about 6 p.m., this was for a 8:15 p.m. kickoff, the public money came in hard on the popular side. And Marcus said he watched the line move in real time. The books were taking the public money on the home team at their asking price, but they were also moving the line to make that side less attractive, even as they were accepting the bets. It was like watching a dam break. All that public money came pouring in, and it moved the market. But Marcus and his team, they had already positioned themselves on the other side during the daytime hours. They had gotten their bets in at better prices during the normal trading hours when the market was more efficient. And by the time that final hour hit, they were just watching their positions become more valuable as the line moved their direction. They didn't place a single new bet in that final hour. They didn't need to. They already had their money down at the numbers they wanted. Now, the thing that's really important to understand here is that this public money effect isn't random. It's not like sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It's predictable. The professional bettors have figured out the patterns. They know which games are going to attract the most public money, which sides, which totals. They've got algorithms, they've got tracking systems, they've got years of historical data showing them exactly how the public money flows. And one of the biggest patterns they've identified is that during that final hour before kickoff, the public money tends to bet heavily on favorites and over totals. Why? Because people feel like they need to make quick decisions. They're looking for action. They haven't done deep analysis, and there's something about a favorite or an over that feels safer, more comfortable, especially when you're rushing to get your bet in. It's a cognitive bias. It's predictable. And the sharp money knows this. So, what happens is, the books see that public money coming in on the favorites and the overs, and they start moving the lines to protect themselves. They're reducing the attractiveness of those sides, moving the point spread against the public money flow, adjusting the over-under upward. This creates a situation where that final hour before kickoff is actually one of the worst times to be betting if you're betting on the popular sides. You're not just betting against the teams or the players. You're betting against the entire market and the direction of money flow. You're paying a price that's been inflated by public demand. It's like going to buy a ticket to a concert right before it sells out. Yeah, there's probably some value in buying that ticket if it's going to sell out anyway and you really want to go. But if you're buying it just because the crowd is buying it, you're probably paying more than you should. I heard another story from a sharp I talked to named David. David's been in the business for about 15 years, and he's one of those guys who's built a sustainable, profitable betting practice through sheer discipline and understanding of the markets. He told me about a specific game from a couple of seasons ago that really illustrated the public money effect in a dramatic way. It was a playoff game in the NFL, a wild card matchup. There was a lot of media attention on it, a lot of public interest. The popular narrative was that one team was a feel-good story, the underdog that deserved to win, the team that people were rooting for. Early in the week, the line was that team at +9. The sharp money started hitting that side, thinking it was undervalued, that the public sentiment would eventually reflect in the line. And the line started moving down to +8, +7.5. That's normal market action. That's the sharps moving the line. But by Thursday afternoon, the public interest really started to build. There were stories about the team's journey, about the players, all these emotional narratives. And as Thursday evening arrived and Friday came around, the sports books knew what was coming. They knew there was going to be serious public money on that underdog. So the books started moving the line the opposite direction. They started moving it back out. By Friday night, the line was back at +8.5, +9. They were moving it against the public narrative, against where everyone thought the value was. And then Saturday arrived, and the final hours before the game came around. David said it was brutal. The public money came absolutely pouring in on that underdog. Everyone and their mother wanted a piece of that team, and the line moved out to +9.5, +10. The underdogs kept getting bigger and bigger as the public piled on. And David's team, they had gotten their money in at +8 and +8.5 in the early part of the week. They watched as their +8 position became a +10 play for everyone else, placing bets in that final hour. The team didn't win the game, but it didn't matter for David's team's profits. They'd gotten in at better numbers. They'd positioned before the public money tsunami hit. The other thing about that final hour is that it creates what I call the trap game scenario. This is when a sportsbook will deliberately move a line to attract public money on what they think is the wrong side, only to move it back once the game gets closer or once they've collected enough liability on that side. Imagine a game where there's heavy public interest in one team. The public wants to bet on them. The sharp money. They've analyzed this game, and they think the other team is the better value. So the sharps get their money down on the other team. The books see the public interest coming, but they also see that the sharp money is already positioned. So, they move the line to attract more public money on the popular team. They make it a more attractive number for that team, and the public takes the bait. They see that attractive number in the final hour, they think they found a good deal. they hammer the side. Then the books have collected a ton of money on that side, and they move the line back. They move it sharply. And anyone who just bet on that popular team in that final hour is already sitting on a worse number than they could have gotten earlier in the week. This happens constantly. And the casual bettor, they don't see it as a trap because they're not thinking about where the line was days ago or where it might move next. They're just looking at the number right now and thinking that's all that matters. I've got another example that really drives this home. There's this guy I talked to, a professional gambler named Raj, and Raj has been betting on sports for about 12 years. He's not as high volume as some of the other guys, but he's incredibly disciplined, and he's got one of the highest win rates I've come across. He told me about his experience, specifically analyzing the hour before kickoff across hundreds of games over several seasons. He had a friend who was in the business of collecting betting data, tracking line movements, tracking where money was coming from. They did this analysis, where they looked at every game over a full season. They tracked the line movement in the final hour before kickoff. They tracked the volume of money, and then they tracked the results. What they found was that the sides that received the most money flow in the final hour before kickoff actually had a lower win rate than the sides that received less money. The public money was literally betting on the sides with lower win rates. The favorites that got pummeled by public money in that final hour? They underperformed. The overs that got hit hard in that final hour? They underperformed. This wasn't a small effect either. This was a statistically significant, repeatable pattern. The sharps were so good at predicting where the public money was going to go, and the books were so good at moving the lines to balance their liability, that by the time the public arrived in that final hour, they were basically buying the worst numbers on the worst sides of the market. Now, the reason this matters so much for you if you're a bettor is that it means the timing of your bet is not just about when you feel like betting, it's about market efficiency. It's about whether you're betting when the market is providing value or when it's been distorted by incoming volume and liability concerns. And this is where most bettors get it completely wrong. They think about timing in terms of information. They think, well, I want to wait until I have all the information about the game, or I want to wait and see if anyone gets injured right before the game. And sure, that's a consideration. If there's important information coming out right before the game, you'd want to know that. But most games don't have that kind of late-breaking information. Most of the time, everything you need to know about a game you know by the afternoon before it happens. And if you're waiting around for some mysterious information that's going to drop right before kickoff, you're probably just making excuses for why you're not doing the necessary research earlier in the process. There's also a psychological component to this that's really important. The closer a game gets to kickoff, the more emotional bettors become. Their decision-making becomes more influenced by recency bias, by last-minute narratives, by things they just read or just heard. Someone posts a tweet about a key player's mindset going into the game, or there's a piece on ESPN about momentum, and suddenly bettors are thinking about that narrative more than they're thinking about the actual value. The sharp money, they've insulated themselves from that emotional pressure by getting their bets in early. They've committed to a position, they've done their analysis, they've locked in their numbers. They can't second-guess themselves in that final hour because they're not even placing bets in that final hour. But the casual bettor, they're in the worst possible headspace during that final hour. They're anxious about the game, they're seeing other people betting, they're feeling FOMO, they're reacting to every new piece of information that arrives, and they're placing bets at the worst possible prices while in the worst possible emotional state. It's a recipe for disaster. Let me give you another concrete example. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a sharp named Chris, and he was telling me about an NBA game that happened earlier this season. There was a team that was dealing with some injury issues, and the public narrative was really negative about their chances in this particular game. The sharp money saw an opportunity because the line had moved pretty heavily against this team. They were significant underdogs, and the sharps thought the public was overreacting to the injuries. A couple of sharps had positioned themselves on this underdog team during the day, getting them at good numbers, maybe around +7 or +8. But then, as game time approached, the public money kept coming in on the favorite. The narrative was stronger than ever. Everyone in every sportsbook and every sports talk show was talking about how bad the situation was for this underdog. The line kept moving. It got to +9, +9.5, and the sharps who had gotten in at +7? They were sitting on increasingly valuable positions, but they didn't add more money in that final hour. They didn't need to. They already had their exposure, they already had their positioning, and they already had better numbers than anything that was being offered to the public in that final hour. The underdog ended up covering. Actually, they won the game outright, and Chris told me that the sharps who had positioned early made a ton of money, while the sharps who waited for more information or who tried to add to their positions in that final hour ended up getting worse numbers on the same side of the same game. This brings us to something that's really critical to understand about the public money effect, and that's why it exists in the first place. The sportsbooks are not in the business of predicting who's going to win games. They're in the business of managing liability and taking balanced action. They want money on both sides of the line. They want to win a percentage of the money bet, regardless of who wins the game. That's how they make their money, through the vigorish, through the juice, through that little bit of percentage they take on both sides of every bet. The public money effect exists because the public bets in predictable patterns. The public bets on favorites. The public bets on overs. The public bets on popular teams and against unpopular teams. The public waits until right before the game to place bets. And the books know all of this. They've studied it for decades. They've got data on it. They know exactly when the public money is going to arrive and which direction it's going to come from, so they move their lines accordingly to protect themselves. They move lines against where they think the public money is going to come from. They adjust odds on overs if they think the public is going to bet the over. They adjust the point spread against favorites if they think the public is going to hammer the favorite. All of this is designed to balance their books and protect their liability. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how the market works. But here's the thing that a lot of bettors don't realize. This system works great if you're the sharp money. It works great if you understand the dynamics, if you're positioning early, if you're getting your money down during the efficient hours of the market. But it works terribly if you're the public money. Because you're arriving after the sharps, you're arriving after the books have already made their predictions about where you're going to bet. And you're arriving when the prices have already been adjusted against you. You're essentially the last person to know about the party, and by the time you show up, everyone else is already positioned for you to show up exactly when you're showing up. The other thing that makes the final hour before kickoff so dangerous is the concentration of volume. All that public money doesn't arrive gradually throughout the day. It arrives in a rush in that final 60 minutes. This creates a situation where the market is overwhelmed, where there's massive imbalance on one side, where the books are forced to move the line dramatically to protect themselves. I've seen point spreads move 2 to 3 full points in the final hour before kickoff. 2 to 3 points in the final hour. That's an enormous movement. And that happens because the volume is so concentrated, the direction is so predictable, and the books need to get the line to a place where they can either get some money on the other side to balance, or where they're comfortable with their exposure if they have to take the liability. When you're placing a bet in that final hour, you're placing it during a period of maximum line volatility, minimum market efficiency, and maximum liability protection on the part of the books. Those are not conditions you want to be betting in. I talked to someone else, a betting analyst named Omar, and Omar has been studying sportsbook behavior and market dynamics for about 8 years. He's built some models that track line movement and try to identify inefficiencies. And he told me that the final hour before kickoff is actually a really fascinating period from an analytical standpoint, because you can almost watch the market being rigged in real time. And when I say rigged, I don't mean illegal or unfair. I mean that the lines are being moved to protect the sportsbook's liability, to balance the action, to position against incoming public money. And Omar said that if you run analysis on the final hour before kickoff across thousands of games, you'll find that the line movements during that hour are almost entirely directional. They're almost entirely moving against the direction of the money that the books are receiving. The books are taking money on one side, and moving the line away from that side. This is because they're trying to move the line to where they can get money on the other side. And if you're placing a bet during that hour, you're placing a bet during a period when the line is being actively moved against the direction of the volume. It's extremely difficult to find value during those conditions. Here's another thing that I didn't fully appreciate until I started researching this topic. The public money effect creates what's called a sharp trap. This is when the line moves so far against the public money in an attempt to balance it that it actually creates value for the sharp money on the opposite side. Let me break this down with an example. Imagine a game where the opening line is a team at -7. The sharp money does analysis and thinks that team is worth -6.5, so they don't think there's value on that side. They also don't think the other team is worth +7, because they don't think the other team is actually that good, so the sharp money waits. But then, as the week goes on, public sentiment builds on the favorite. The public thinks this team is dominant. They want to bet on them. The sharp money starts to position on the underdog, thinking the public is overreacting. The books see the public money is coming on the favorite, so they start moving the line, moving it to -8, -8.5, trying to get some money on the other side. But the public money keeps coming, keeps coming. By the time the final hour arrives, the line is at -9. -9! The favorite has moved from -7 to -9, a 2-point movement, all because the public wanted to bet on them. And now, if you're a sharp, you look at that -9, and you say, wait, the underdog at +9 is actually pretty good value now. The public overcorrected. I can actually find some value on the other side now. So the sharp money starts to get more exposure on the underdog because the line has moved so far against the public money that it's created value on the other side. The books are now faced with heavy liability on the favorite because of the public money and heavy liability on the underdog because of the sharp adding. And the game gets closer, and maybe it's a tight game, and the books take a loss on it. But even if the books take a loss, the individual bettor who got on the underdog in that final hour because they saw it at +9 got worse numbers than they could have gotten earlier in the day because the line was more efficient then. The point I'm trying to make is that the final hour before kickoff is complicated. It's a time when the lines are moving, when the money is flowing in a predictable direction, when the books are actively managing their liability, and when the market is at its most inefficient. And if you're not equipped to understand those dynamics and trade within those dynamics like the sharp money does, you should probably just not bet during that hour. You should get your bets in earlier, during the normal trading hours when the market is more efficient, when you have more time to think, when you're not influenced by last-minute narratives and emotions. Now, let's talk specifically about the public money effect and what it actually means. The public money effect is basically the phenomenon where money from casual bettors, from the general public who don't have sophisticated betting systems or deep analysis, arrives in waves and distorts the market. It's predictable, it's measurable, and the sharp money has figured out how to trade around it. The public money effect has a few characteristics. First, it's directional. The public money tends to come from specific directions. It tends to favor favorites over underdogs. It tends to favor overs over unders. It tends to favor popular teams and narratives. Second, it's concentrated in time. The public money doesn't arrive gradually. It arrives in bursts, especially right before games, when people are thinking about the game, when they want to get some action in, when their friends are talking about it. Third, it's predictable. The sharp money has studied where the public money comes from. They know which games are going to get public money, and they know which direction it's going to come from. Fourth, it's inefficient. The public money doesn't care about value. It cares about narratives, about rooting interest, about the teams that are popular. So the money flows in ways that distort the prices away from true value. And the sportsbooks have built their entire operation around managing the public money effect. They have departments dedicated to predicting where the public money is going to come from. They use public data, they use betting data, they collect, they use analytics. They know that on a Monday night game featuring a popular team, they're going to get a ton of money on that team. They know that on a game featuring a controversial referee decision from the previous week, they're going to get money from people who want to revenge bet. They know exactly which types of games and matchups are going to attract heavy public money, and they move their lines accordingly. I'll give you an example of how this works in practice. A few years ago, there was an NFL playoff game between a team that had a huge fan base and a team that was considered less popular. The opening line had the popular team at -6, but the sportsbooks knew that this game was going to get a ton of public money on the popular team because of their fan base. So instead of waiting for the public money to come and then moving the line, they actually moved the line themselves early in the week. They moved the opening line to -6.5, -7. They were betting that the public money was coming, and they were moving the line early to protect themselves. And they were right, the public money came throughout the week. By the time the game rolled around, the line had moved out to -7.5, -8 in many places. The popular team had gone from a -6 dog to an overwhelming favorite. And the reason they moved so much wasn't because the sharps came in and analyzed the game and decided the team was that good. It was because the public money came in and distorted the market. And the sharps, they had positioned themselves on the other side early in the week before the public money arrived. One of the sharpest bettors I talked to, a guy named Adebayo, he was explaining to me how he uses the public money effect to his advantage. Adebayo has been betting professionally for about 20 years, and he's built a very systematic approach to the game. He told me that his entire betting philosophy is based around predicting and trading against the public money effect. He doesn't try to predict who's going to win games. He tries to predict where the public money is going to come from, and he positions himself on the other side. He studies the narratives around games. He looks at which teams are popular, which ones are unpopular, which ones are getting a ton of media coverage. He looks at the previous week's results, and which teams are on winning streaks or losing streaks, because the public tends to chase performance. He builds a model that predicts where the public money is going to flow. And then he positions himself against that flow. If he thinks the public is going to bet the over, he gets his money on the under. If he thinks the public is going to bet the favorite, he gets his money on the underdog. And he does this during the day, during the morning, during the efficient hours of the market. Then he lets the public money come, he lets it move the lines in his direction, and he profits. Adebayo told me about a specific game where he nailed this perfectly. There was a college football game between a blue blood program and a lesser-known school. The public was going crazy about this matchup. The blue blood program was getting massive amounts of media attention, they had a star quarterback, there were all these narratives about how dominant they were, how this lesser-known team didn't belong on the same field. Adebayo looked at the opening line, which had the blue blood at -14, and he said, "Okay, this is a public money trap." He analyzed the matchup and thought the blue blood was good, but he didn't think they were that good. He thought the actual edge was like -12, maybe -11.5. But he knew the public was going to hammer the blue blood. They were going to chase those narratives, and the line was going to move. So he got his money on the underdog at +14. Not because he thought the underdog was going to win, but because he thought +14 was good value given where he thought the true line was. And then the public money came in hard on the blue blood throughout the week. The line moved from -14 to -16, -17. By game day, the blue blood was a massive chalk bet, and Adebayo's position on the underdog at +14 became increasingly valuable. The blue blood won the game, but they didn't cover. They won by 10, and Adebayo's underdog +14 bet was a winner. He didn't need the underdog to win the game, he just needed them to stay within 14 points. And because he had positioned against the public money flow, that's exactly what happened. This is the key to understanding why you should never bet in that final hour before kickoff. It's not just that the line might move against you, it's that the entire market structure is working against you. The sharp money has already positioned, the books have already predicted where you're going to bet, the line has already been adjusted in anticipation of your arrival. You're betting after everyone else has already made their move. You're betting when the prices have been distorted by liability concerns and public money flows. You're betting when the market is at its least efficient. Why would you do that? I talked to this one guy, a retired sportsbook operator named Derek, and Derek spent about 15 years actually working on the other side of the counter, making the lines, managing liability, taking bets at a major sportsbook. He quit the business about 10 years ago and has been a sharp bettor ever since. Derek told me that from the perspective of someone who's worked inside a sportsbook, the hour before kickoff is basically a gift for the sportsbooks. He said the public bettors are doing the sportsbooks' job for them. They're moving the lines in the exact direction the sportsbooks want them to move. They're removing the sportsbooks' liability by betting on the sides the sportsbooks are overexposed on. They're creating a situation where the sportsbooks don't have to eat losses, they just have to take the juice on the volume. Derek told me that if he was still working at a sportsbook, he would be actively encouraging people to bet in that final hour. He'd be putting out promotions, offering bonuses, trying to get as much late money on the board as possible, because he knows exactly what's going to happen. The public money is going to come in predictable directions, it's going to move the line in predictable ways, and the sportsbooks are going to be positioned perfectly to profit from it. Now, there's another angle to the public money effect that's worth discussing, and that's the effect on totals specifically. Overs and unders are even more susceptible to the public money effect than point spreads are, because the public has a natural bias toward overs. People like overs. There's something about an over that feels fun, that feels like a higher scoring game is more entertaining, more exciting. Sharps don't feel that way. Sharps don't care if a game is high scoring or low scoring, they care about where the true probability is, but the public bets overs at a much higher rate than unders, especially late in the day. This is well documented, there's research on it. The public consistently bets overs in the hour before kickoff, and the sportsbooks know this, so they move their totals upward to protect themselves. They know the over money is coming, so they raise the over line, making the over less attractive, making the under more attractive. This creates a situation where the under becomes increasingly valuable as game time approaches, even if the game is trending toward being a high-scoring affair. The over bettors are getting worse and worse odds as the public money piles on, while the under bettors are getting better and better odds as the books adjust. I heard a story from a former oddsmaker named Svetlana, and Svetlana spent about 12 years making lines at various sportsbooks, both illegal and legal operations. She's now retired and occasionally consults for betting syndicates. Svetlana told me that one of the most obvious patterns she noticed during her time making lines was how predictable the public money flow was on totals. She said she could literally predict within a few cents where the public money was going to move the over by the time the game kicked off, based on the opening total, based on the type of game, based on the teams involved. She said it was so predictable that she could basically set the opening line knowing exactly where she wanted it to end up before kickoff, and then let the public money do the work of moving the line there. It was like setting a trap. She'd open a total at a number that was below where she wanted it to end up, knowing the public was going to hammer the over, knowing that the over money was going to push the total higher. And then she'd watch it happen exactly as she predicted. By the time the game kicked off, the total had moved to exactly where she wanted it to be, and the public was stuck with the worst number. The thing about all of this is that it's not malicious. The sportsbooks aren't doing anything illegal or even particularly unethical. They're just operating according to how the market works. They're taking balanced action, they're managing their liability, they're adjusting prices based on the volume they're receiving. If the public wants to systematically make bad decisions by betting late, by betting without proper analysis, by chasing narratives instead of value, the sportsbooks are just going to accommodate that and take advantage of it. That's capitalism, that's markets. The inefficiency exists, and the people who understand it exploit it. But what's interesting is that you don't have to be on the losing side of this. You don't have to be part of the public money effect. You can position yourself like the sharp money. You can do your analysis, get your bets in early, avoid the final hour before kickoff altogether. And suddenly, you're playing a different game. You're playing the game that the sharp money is playing. You're getting your bets in during efficient market hours, you're locking in your numbers, you're positioning yourself before the public arrives, and then you're just watching the market move in your direction as the public money piles on. The other thing about avoiding the final hour is that it actually forces you to be a more disciplined bettor. If you know you're not going to bet in the final hour, you have to do your homework earlier. You have to make your decisions while you're thinking clearly, while you're not influenced by last-minute narratives or emotions. You have to commit to a position and stick with it. Sharps aren't sitting around the hour before a game, wondering if they should place bets. They've already done the work. They've already made the decision. They're just waiting for the game to play out, and that psychological advantage alone is worth a lot. You're not second-guessing yourself. You're not feeling FOMO. You're not getting caught up in the emotional whirlwind of the final hour before a game. I'll give you another example to drive this home. There's a professional bettor named Jamal, and Jamal has a very simple system. He makes all his bets before 2 p.m. That's his rule. No matter what, he doesn't place any bets after 2 p.m. on the day of the game. Before 2 p.m., he's got all his homework done. He's analyzed the games, he's checked the latest information, he's thought about what he wants to do. And then he pulls the trigger on his bets, and then he's done. The game approaches, the lines move, the public money comes, and Jamal is sitting on his positions. He's not even looking at the lines anymore. He's not tempted to add or adjust, or try to outsmart the market in the final hour. He's locked into his positions. And Jamal has a 52% win rate, which might not sound like a lot, but in the betting world, especially over thousands of bets, a 52% win rate is extremely profitable. Because he's getting paid better than even money on his winners, he's got good discipline, he's not getting tricked by the public money effect. He's consistently beating the market by a couple of percentage points, and over time that compounds into serious money. Jamal told me that implementing this system was actually one of the best decisions he made as a bettor, not because it increased his win rate necessarily, but because it increased his consistency. He said that before he had this rule, he had some great months and some terrible months. He'd get caught up in the momentum of games, he'd try to add to positions at bad times, he'd chase losses by betting more in the final hour. But once he implemented the rule, his results became much more consistent and predictable. The win rate was more stable. The variance was lower, and that consistency is valuable in betting, because it means you can actually project your results over time. You can manage your bankroll better. You can survive the inevitable downswings that come in gambling. Here's something else that's important to understand about the public money effect. It's not just at the sportsbooks. It happens in all betting markets. It happens on the betting exchanges, like Betfair, where you can bet on either side of a game against other bettors. It happens in the prop betting market. It happens on alternative spreads and totals. The public money effect is a universal phenomenon in betting markets because the public is everywhere, and the public consistently bets in predictable, inefficient ways. The sharp money understands this and positions accordingly, no matter which market they're betting in. I talked to someone who works on one of the major betting exchanges, a guy named Vikram, and Vikram has been analyzing betting data on the exchanges for about 8 years. He told me that the public money effect on the exchanges is even more pronounced than it is at traditional sportsbooks, because the exchanges are purely peer-to-peer. There's no sportsbook managing liability. It's just bettors betting against each other. And what that means is that, when the public money arrives, there's nothing smoothing out the market. The prices get even more distorted because the sharp money is trying to take advantage of the public money, and the public is just piling on in one direction. Vikram said he's seen markets move 10 to 15% in the final hour before a game on the exchanges. The prices are being absolutely hammered by the final hour public money, and the sharpest bettors are the ones who are on the opposite side of that movement, who have already positioned, and who are just watching their prices improve as the public arrives. So, what's the takeaway here? The public money effect is real. It's measurable, it's predictable, and if you understand it, you can position yourself to profit from it like the sharp money does. But if you don't understand it, if you're just betting whenever you feel like betting, if you're placing significant bets in the final hour before kickoff, you're probably on the wrong side of the effect. You're probably betting at distorted prices. You're probably betting when the market is least efficient. And you're probably going to lose money consistently, especially if you're doing this across a large sample of games. The simple solution is to get your bets in early. Do your homework during the day. Make your decisions. Place your bets before the public money arrives. And then just wait. Let the market move. Let the public money do its thing. And if you've done your homework well, if you've found actual value, if you've positioned correctly, you'll profit as the market moves in your direction. That's the game the sharp money plays. That's why they're winning, and that's why you should never bet 1 hour before kickoff. Now, let me wrap this up. If you've been betting in that final hour before games, I want you to seriously consider changing that. I want you to consider implementing a system like Jamal's, where you have a hard cutoff time. Maybe it's 2 p.m. like Jamal, maybe it's earlier, maybe it's right at the opening lines, and you just fade the public from that point. But whatever it is, the principle is the same. Get your analysis done, make your decisions, place your bets, and then stay disciplined. Don't let the final hour tempt you. Don't let FOMO or last-minute narratives push you to place bets at bad times, because the market is working against you in that final hour. If you found this breakdown valuable, if you're serious about improving your betting discipline and starting to see some real results, then you need to be watching more of this content. We're going deep into the sharp money secrets, the things that the pros don't want the public to know, the patterns that separate consistent winners from consistent losers. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode, check out the other content on the channel, and get ready to level up your betting game.